Hello my friends, this is Sylvie Curry. Today I'm going to be answering some questions that I frequently get from people who I come in contact with, family, friends. These are all questions regarding barbecue, misconceptions, just general information that they want to know about what happens in barbecue. It's always assumed that just because I do competition barbecue that I must be an expert. Far from the truth, friends, far from the truth. I have a lot of hit and misses along the way, a lot of trial and error, and I just do what I do and I hope for the best. My biggest secret, and it's not really a secret, my biggest way of making sure that I do well is to be consistent, organized, not skip steps. That's the most important thing. I'll start in with some of the questions I've outlined. Home cooking versus competition cooking. They're totally different. In home cooking, you cook for family and friends to your taste. You cook what you like. There's no right or wrong way. There's no, it has to be done this way. It's what you like. And no one can tell you you're wrong if you cook something that everybody likes. For that, I just say keep on doing what you're doing. Now, if you can improve, maybe doing some other techniques and processes, but in general, if you like it, keep it going. Competition barbecue, we're usually cooking for the judges. And the judges could be some of your family and friends. But somehow or other, when they get in that judging tent, they change up a bit with what they like or what they want. Yeah, there are certain guidelines that the sanctioning bodies have for what type of chicken, rib, pork, or brisket, what it should be like. But in general, it's based upon your general preferences. Cooking in the competition arena, we're cooking for a one bite. Judges usually have 6 samples in front of them, and they're taking usually one bite of that sample and making a judgment on texture and taste based on that one bite. Therefore, when we cook competition, we usually have to assure that that one bite is going to be pop in their mouth and make them think, wow, that was the best thing I ever ate. When you're cooking at home, it's not a one bite. People may eat 3-4 ribs. They eat a whole piece of chicken. They eat multiple slices of brisket. So therefore, it's just a continuing flavor that's going on in their mouth and the sensation that, that's good. And it may not be anything that would make a judge in a competition say, that's the best thing I ever ate. But in general, it's still good meat. We do a lot of fancy things to meats in barbecue competitions. We use a lot of butter, margarine, sugar, honey, agave, all sorts of sweeteners, rubs which contain varied ingredients. Some contain pecan flavoring, some contain cherry, some contain peach. Some are just salt, pepper, garlic, and onion powder. Some of them contain paprika, some of them don't. So they're just very different types of rubs. The most important flavor that's in a rub is going to be your salt, then next probably your pepper. Paprika gives you color. And all the other things are just an enhancement of all those other flavors. At home when I cook, don't be surprised, but a lot of times I'm just going to use salt and pepper. It's very appealing to me, it tastes very good, and it's not a whole lot of flavors that just go all over the world with their way that they taste to me or to my friends and family. In addition, some of my sauces that I use at home are basic sauces. They aren't the sugary coated sauces that I would use in competition. And heck, sometimes I don't even put sauce on things like ribs or chicken. Even brisket I don't put sauce on at home. The only thing that may get a little bit of sauce might be my pork, and that would be something that's, say, a general peppery, vinegary type sauce, and that's just my preference, my husband's preference. There's no right or wrong way, as I mentioned. It's what you like. Now I will say this though, there are a lot of people who I meet in competition, I'll call them rookies, people who are just getting into it, whose friends and families told them, wow, you have the best barbecue I've ever tasted. And they think when they come into this competition, hey, my friends and family like it, my stuff must be good. And they find out that, nope, don't work that way. They don't place very well, and they're wondering, well, why? You know, everybody else likes it, must be something wrong with those judges. No, it's just as I said before, there's a difference in what you present to a judge versus what you present to family and friends. The heads that are the hardest are people who do a lot of catering, own restaurants, food trucks, all the sorts, who have customers lined up who love their meat. Customers who tell them they have the best thing ever. They cook that at a competition. Nope, doesn't fly. Not going to make it. And that's just because there's something that competition cooks know about presentation to a judge, and it's all regarding that one bite. So I always tell people, you know, it's not always the judge. They don't always get it right either, but it's not always the judges. It's just a matter of what competition is all about. There's also a lot of regional variations in what people like and what they don't like. And for example, I just mentioned that on my pork, I like to have a peppery vinegar type sauce. Regionally on the West Coast, that doesn't go well. Midwest, that doesn't go well. That's usually a South Carolina, North Carolina type sauce that is used, a vinegary sauce or mustard-based sauce. California, it's usually a tomato base with a lot of sugar. Which gets me to something else. One of the things that I just can't stand, and you find that your judges can't stand it either, liquid smoke. You can smell it. It doesn't smell natural, even though some liquid smokes are based upon actually doing the processing by cooking wood, are doing wood and putting water over it and getting the flavor out of it. It still just doesn't smell natural to me. It has a made up smell, and I don't like it. A lot of the sauces that are used or that you purchase in the grocery stores mainly contain liquid smoke. So your family and friends, they're used to that. You see the Masterpiece barbecue sauce or the Kraft barbecue sauce, all of those are heavily advertised. People purchase them, and over time they just got used to it. So they thought that was natural. Judges don't like liquid smoke. One of the other questions people ask me is regarding the type of cookers that I have. And I have a number of different vessels that I use. At home, I have a gas grill, which I love. Comes in very handy cooking at home. You go and turn it on, it's on. You turn it off, it's off. You don't have to wait for the charcoals or anything like that to get hot. In addition, I live in an area where it's a lot of fire hazards out here, and so I don't want to risk having sparks or anything like that from charcoal or whatever to starting a fire out here. So I prefer to use my gas grill. On my trailer, I have two smokers. Both of them are what we call reverse flow. They're enclosed, so the risk of sparks and things like that are minimal. And I use those most often when I'm cooking for a big group or for a party. Also, here on my deck I have a WSM, and I cook on it whatever. Anything that I would cook on the gas grill or my other smokers, I cook on my WSM, my Weber Smoky Mountain. You asked me what I would recommend for someone. Depends on what you want to do. If you're only going to be grilling hamburgers, steaks, hot dogs, and things like that, then you're probably better off with a grill. Some grill of sorts. It could be the gas grill, or it could be a kettle, or charbroiler, any of those brands. It depends on what you like and what you can afford. If you want to do some smoking, then you might want to get something like a bullet smoker, a drum, a Weber Smoky Mountain, something on that level. But it depends on how much you're going to be doing this and how much you're going to put into it. Smoking on things like an ugly drum or even some of the other smokers takes time and effort and thought and fire management. And you know, you may not want to do that. You may be one of those who just wants to take something out of the refrigerator, put a little rub and stuff on it, put it in the smoker and let it go, take it off and be through with it. Talking about what type of cooker, smoker, or grill to recommend, as I mentioned, I really can't recommend one. But one of the considerations that I always make to people is that you have to consider whether or not you can transport it or it needs to be transported. For example, if you have a drum, consider that drums, the bottom of them get very, very hot, and you don't want to put them on a surface other than, say, dirt or something, cement or something like that, where it won't burn. And lifting them, they're bulky, so they may be hard to lift. Maybe you need something that has wheels so you can move it from one place to another. If you're going to leave it stationary in one area, it's not going anywhere, go for it, whatever you want. And that would pertain to something like a gas grill that you have at home on your patio or whatever. Those are stationary, they're not going anywhere. If you're going to be doing tailgating or going over someone's house for a barbecue and you want to take your own smoker, can it fit in whatever vehicle that you're going to put it in? Those are considerations. It's all about what you want. I suggest, though, that before you go out and buy something, that you thoroughly investigate how it's used and what you can do with it. And there are a lot of videos on YouTube as such where you can look that up. Just put in the keyword for whatever the smoker grill is and wow, go to watching. As I always say, YouTube is your friend. Okay, do you get a gas, charcoal, pellet? Depends on you. Pellet smokers are probably very easy for the home cook. And I say that because you set it at a certain temperature, it gets to that temperature, and you cook. You don't have to worry about adjusting the vents or the intake or the vents for the outtake. You don't have to do any of that. You just turn it on and you're good to go. Gas grills, I mentioned before, gas grills are, I like them. What can I say? Don't let anybody tell you that when you're cooking on a gas grill that your food's going to taste like gas. That's not the case. Don't let anybody tell you that the only clean smoke you're going to get is going to be on a pellet grill. That's not the case. It depends on how you manage the fire and how you manage the wood. Very important with smokers like a WSM, reverse smokers, char broilers and all those type of smokers. One of the considerations is how you manage your fire. You always want a clean smoke. When you see all this very dark smoke coming out of a smoker, that's dirty smoke. And all it's going to do is make your food taste bitter. You want to have a nice clean smoke, and they call that a blue smoke sometimes because you can see it, but it's just whispery and it just sort of like flows out. There's no acrid smell to it. Okay, wood. I get asked also, well, what kind of wood do you use? It varies, depends on what I'm doing. In competitions, I'm primarily going to be using woods such as pecan and cherry. Every once in a while, I'll stick some apple in there, but it's primarily going to be pecan and cherry. At home, it could be pecan, cherry, maple, oak. I even use the wine barrels, old wine barrels. I like to use that sometimes. The only woods that I usually don't use, or I don't like, are things like mesquite. I think mesquite is too harsh, and I think that when people cook with mesquite wood in the home environment, they overdo it. Peach wood would be great if I had access to it. That would be here at home. I don't have access to that. Then you have all sorts of other woods depending upon if you're cooking fish and things like that. And fish, alder, or you can use something like I already mentioned maple. So it just depends on what you're cooking, and the guidelines for that are up to you. What do you like? Pellets. Pellets come in all different flavors also. You can get cherry, pecan, peach, all those different flavors in a pellet, so go at it. Question regarding why my chicken always burns when I grill it. And I have a specific person who asked me that question, and there's two general reasons why it would burn before getting done. Number one being that you're cooking it over direct flame and fire, and that's too hot. It's going to burn the outside before the internal temperature is up to 165-ish. The other reason is a lot of people put barbecue sauce on their chicken before it's done. The barbecue sauce should only put on that chicken right before you get ready to take it off, because all those sugars in there will just burn. Let's go back to indirect fire. Indirect fire would be the preferred mechanism for cooking something like chicken. And what indirect means is that it's on your smoker or your grill, but it's not directly over the flames or the heat source. It's to the side of the heat source, so that it's cooking more like an oven, but with that barbecue type flavor from the charcoal, the wood that you have there. It's preferred that you cook it indirect until it gets up to near temperature. Then you can put it on the direct side to get your browning, or to get a more, I won't call it crispy, a more done look to your skin, or brown skin. The sugar, once again, the sauces should only be put on right before you get ready to take it off. And actually, you know, if you eat at my house, when I cook barbecue chicken, I don't put the sauce on it. I leave it to the side, and for those who want to put it on, they can put it on. And that being because I have some friends who are diabetic and they can't tolerate the sugar. So how do you make an indirect fire? On a gas grill is very simple. Usually you have more than one burner. You turn one burner on, the other ones are off. And you cook the meat or whatever on the side where the burner is off. On a charcoal grill, you just place your charcoal to one side of that grill so that the heat's coming up from that one side, and the other side has no charcoal or heat coming up. Okay. What are some of the other questions I get? And they're funny. One question I sometimes get is, well, you're a woman, why are you doing this barbecue cooking? And that's a very, very male chauvinist viewpoint. And I just have to say it's all cooking. It's all cooking. It's not a matter of that outdoors is for the men to cook and indoors for the women. And day by day, I try to get rid of that myth by just showing up and cooking. It's funny though, sometimes we'll be at an event, a competition, and my hubby will be right there with me, standing or sitting next to each other in the general vicinity, and people come around sometimes, and when they come around they have questions about, oh, what are you doing, and they ask some of the same questions that I've just answered are the questions that they may start asking, and usually they ask them of my husband. And I mean, my trailer, if you've ever seen it, says Lady of Q, and my husband has to correct them and say, I'm not the Lady of Q, she is. So all those questions and stuff that they're asking him, he has to redirect them to me. And that's when those questions come up. It's like, oh, but you're a woman. I even had one friend, this is unrelated to cooking, it's more in the transportation mode. Pulling my trailer takes a very big truck, and a heavy duty truck, and the trailer's a 20-foot trailer. And the statement came up, we were sitting around talking, and this guy had the nerve to say, can she handle it? Meaning, to my husband the question was asked, can she handle that? And it's like, can she handle it? It's driving a truck, pulling a trailer. Yes, I can handle that. Isn't that very chauvinistic? I mean, if I had asked him, could he handle it, it would have been like, oh my God. No. It's not a matter of gender. It's not a matter of male versus female. It's just a matter of getting behind the wheel and just doing it. Yeah, I can handle it. There are some things that I can't handle, though, I'll admit. And I can't lift certain things. So weight-wise, you know, if something's more than 40 pounds, 50 pounds, it's very hard for me to lift. And therefore I need assistance. Other than that, there's very few things that I can't do that a guy does out there in the barbecue competition world. Okay, other questions? Meats. What type of meats do I use and where do I get them? In general, where I get my sources for meats varies depending on the meat. So for example, something like briskets in a competition, I'm going to cook the very best type of a brisket because I'm competing, and why go out there with a brisket that's not as tender, doesn't have as much flavor as another brand. So therefore I'm going to go out there with the most marbled brisket I can get, and they're going to be from sources like Snake River Farms, and it's going to be a Wagyu type brisket. And there is a difference. And people will say, well, what's the difference? If I cook you a prime brisket or a choice brisket and a Wagyu, blindfolded you and asked you to taste, you're going to pick the Wagyu as the one that tastes the better. And it's a texture thing. I can probably get those other two briskets to taste similar to that Wagyu, but it won't have that texture, that mouthfeel that you'll get from the Wagyu. It's just, it's tender, it's marbled. I'm not going to call it creamy, it's just when you put it in your mouth, it's just tastes good, feels good. When it comes to something like chicken, it varies. There's some brands that you can just go to the grocery store and buy and you can do well. In general, I do use an organic chicken, and it's just because I find that I get a more consistent product using this same brand of organic chicken. In the past, I have used Foster Farms, I have used Tyson. In this part of the country, in the West Coast, there's no source available currently for something they use on the East Coast, and that is called Prairie Farms, or Spring Farms, excuse me, Spring Farms. I think Prairie Farms is what they use for pork. But anyway, those are not available here on the West Coast currently. So therefore, I'm limited to my organic chicken, which is what I prefer. Pork, I've used all sorts of pork. I've used pork from Duroc, I've used pork from Smithfield, I've used pork from Prairie Farms, I've used pork from, what's the other one? they sell it at Spartan Final. I can't even think of the name of it, but I've used all of those. And what I find is that I currently do better with the Smithfield brand. And I'm saying currently because it varies. There are some concerns out there now that the Smithfield brand may be more Farmer John or some other brand, and not prior to 2019, the Smithfield brand. So it just depends. How do I do in pork? I'm consistent. Usually in pork, I'm going to be up there. I don't have any first place porks. I'm striving for it, but I do okay in pork. Ribs, I do very well in ribs. I've got a couple of 180 in ribs, so I'm good. So it just depends. You cook it right and you hope for the best. So when you go out there and buy pork and chicken, it doesn't matter for competition. When it comes to the brisket, it does matter. Home cook, if I'm going to cook at home, more than likely I'm going to get a prime brisket, and it's going to be probably from a source like Costco. And the quality of that prime varies. You know, I've had some very, very good, well-marbled primes, and I've had some that were okay. But I haven't cooked the choice brisket in years, and source-wise, just a regular store-bought grocery store brisket, no. And you can look at them, and well, I can look at them. I can tell just by the way it's marbled, the way that the butcher's trimmed it up, the color of the meat. Is it red? Is it off red, grayish, or whatever? You can tell. Which gets into another question of how do you pick? And it's very hard for me to sit here and tell you how I pick. It's just in general, you sort of look at it. And if it looks appealing to you in the package, then it's probably going to look appealing when you cook it, in general. So for example, with something like chicken, is the skin white? Or does it have a whole bunch of yellow flecks or whatever in it? And you look at it, and sometimes you look at it and say, ugh, that looks yucky. And you don't want to buy that. You don't want to cook that. But you look at the skin, and it's nicely packaged, and it's white. There's not any holes in it or hair sticking up out of it. Then you're good to go. When it comes to pork, usually when I pick pork, I'm looking for marbled pork, but primarily because there's specific muscles on that pork that I'm going to cook. And I want to make sure that I get a muscle that I can trim so that I can highlight it in competition. And what I find is that even when I'm cooking at home, I'm still looking for the same thing in my pork. Ribs, one of the big things you're looking for ribs is how it was butchered. Did the butcher who cut it up, what we call boners, did he trim it such that the bones are showing through? On the back of the membrane, did he cut through the membrane? Whether or not the bones are straight. And a lot of times you wonder, how do some pigs or hogs have bones that are straight and some have them that are curved? And I guess it's like people, you know, you come in all shapes. Yeah, pigs and hogs come in all shapes too. In competition, for sure, you want bones that are straight because you're going for appearance. And you want to make sure that when you place it in a box, that those bones are straight. Is it as important at home? Probably not. The other thing I'm looking for is a meaty rib and not a lean rib. I'm looking for something that has a lot of marbling in it. Not clumpy fat, but marbling fat. I remember, oh God, this is when I started cooking a long time ago. And there was some wannabe food critics or reviewers out there. And I remember one in specific who did a review, and this is like almost 10 years ago, who did a review of a barbecue competition in Southern California. And I guess some other teams let him taste their ribs. And one of the things he kept on remarking about was there was too much fat in the ribs. They're too fatty. They're too fatty. And ribs do have fat, and there may be layers of fat in it, but most often in competition, it's not going to be where you just bite into thick fat. And that was because he had no clue of what the difference was between a well-marbled rib and one that was actually clumpy fatty. Anyway, I got off on that one. When I pick ribs, I'm looking for marbling, looking for straight bones, and I'm looking for a meaty rib. What am I looking for when I'm cooking any of my meats? When am I happy with it? What about it makes me happy about it once I cook it? And they're varying things. We'll start with chicken. Number one, you want chicken to look nice. And what we do for chicken in competition is nothing like what I would do at home. In competition, you just deconstruct chicken basically, because you're removing a lot of the fat, you're trimming the skin, and you're trying to make it where when you smoke it that it's bite through. At home, I remove some fat. It's not as much as I would in competition. I remove some skin. I don't go through the process of scraping it or anything like that. I don't even do that for competition anymore. I do get rid of, as I mentioned before, a lot of the big, thick pieces of fat. I don't want those. And that would be in a thigh. At home, I cook primarily legs and thighs and wings. I rarely ever cook breasts. And that being at home because my husband doesn't like the breast. He finds that it's usually quite dry. Even though if it's cooked well, it doesn't have that moistness that you would get with something like a thigh or a leg. How do I know that it's to my liking? It's moist. When you bite into it, it's flavorful. And you want to take another bite. Ribs, the same thing. They're cooked well. You bite into them. And let me get into something else regarding ribs. And I've touched on this before in other videos. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to preface this by saying you cook what you like. And if you like it, then it's okay for you. On my ribs, I do not like fall off the bone ribs. To me, those are overcooked. You may like them, your friends may like them, your family may like them. I don't. When I cook ribs, I cook them so that when you bite into it and you put your teeth into it, it's a clean bite and none of the rest of the meat falls off, but it's tender. And it's not tender fall off the bone, it's tender where it just breaks away from the bone. And not the whole rib breaks away, just that bite that you just made. I like them to be moist, juicy. If you overcook a rib, it goes into the stage where it's dry before it becomes mushy, overcooked, and usually lots of sauce in it. Ugh, don't like that. Anyway, my ribs, I like them moist, juicy, not fall off the bone. Pork, I like my pork also moist, juicy, and I like it to have a lot of flavor in it. If I'm going to put it on, say, a pulled pork sandwich with some coleslaw, with a lot of flavor. Brisket, I like brisket flat, the slices, and I also like the point for making burnt ends. And actually in competition and at home, I cook my brisket very similar so that I get the same effect. At home, I may not trim it as much as I do in competition, but I'm going to cook it almost the same. Okay. Other questions I get asked. Where do I get my rubs and my sauces? I order my rubs and my sauces online, and usually they're from a barbecue supply type store or site. The rubs and sauces that I use, you can't find them in a grocery store in this area. I know that in some areas, competition sauces are stocked by some grocery stores, but here in Southern California, no. So I have to order them from a supplier. I have specific ones that I use. Currently, and this is 2019, I'm using Big Papa Smokers as my supplier, and I've been using him for years. consistent service. They're great over there. They have all the supplies I need, and as I said, the customer service is just fantastic. From him I get rubs by Simply Marvelous, in addition to some of the rubs by Big Papa Smokers, and I blend those rubs. So there's not one specific rub that I get and stick it on the meat. I do a blending of varying rubs. The same with sauces. I order all my sauces online. I don't go to the grocery store and pull anything off the shelf for sauces. And I blend those, so there's not one specific one that I use. I may blend 50-50, I may blend 2-to-1. I'm varying blends that I do. The only thing that I do purchase off the shelf would be something like my fruit juices. That may be apple juice or it might be white grape juice. In addition, I have a marinade that I do use on my brisket, Stubbs beef marinade. Not the sauce, it's the beef marinade. And I use that to wrap my briskets. In addition, sometimes I may even put some, what's the name of that stuff? Beef broth in there. Or I may put something like Cash Cow, which is also from Big Papa Smoker. It's a injection. God, I'm making this a tell-all, aren't I? Showing you everything, telling you everything, but going through the cook with you. If you watch my videos, you put them together, you're going to get the full cook, and you will know. But it's just a matter of being able to put all those videos together. I think I'm going to end here. I think I've discussed most of all the questions that I get from people. Oh, one other thing. I almost forgot this. Slicing or cutting your meats. Number one, you have to have a very sharp knife, and I keep my knife sharp so that when you go through it just cuts right through. I'm not going through any jagged movements with it. In addition, the way that you slice things is very important. Neat slices so that it doesn't look like somebody just went in there and just pulled it apart, and except for pulled apart. Like they just went in there and jaggedly sliced it, and it just looks awful. So nice clean cuts on all my meats. And most important is, it brings me to another story. I was at a party, and I wasn't cooking, I was a guest. And one of the things that they had someone cook was a tri-tip. Not a sheep tri-tip, it was an expensive tri-tip. A couple of them they had on the grill. And when the guy took them off, he started slicing, and he sliced it wrong. Now keep in mind, tri-tip it's a triangular piece of meat, and so it has fibers that run one way and fibers that run another way on the same big chunk of meat. So that as you're slicing along, you're going to get to a point where the fibers change their direction, so you have to change the way you were slicing. What he did was he started slicing based upon one side of it and went around that whole tri-tip and sliced half of it wrong because he went with the grain instead of across the grain on half of that tri-tip. I say that to you so that you can be aware that when you're slicing meats like that, make sure you go across grain, not with the grain. And the significance of that is the tenderness of that piece of meat. Because if you're going with the grain, then you have to bite through a long fiber, versus if you go across the grain, the fiber is shorter, so it's an easier bite. Plus it looks better. Okay, so we've talked about a little bit of everything about barbecue and some of the questions that I've recently received or that I get from people. And I hope this video is useful. I know that it's long, but there may be bits and pieces of it that you can use or not. And keep in mind, this is a barbecue chat. This is not a rant. When I rant, I go and talk to my Ziggy. But here, I'm just sitting on my deck, chilling, and talking to you. Thank you very much for viewing. Hope you all have a lovely day. Like, subscribe, comment. Bye-bye.